Afternoon, good evening, and a namaste from India to all of them who are on this board with us this afternoon. It's wonderful to have this whole session, which is part of something called the Cultural IP Month, which has been a cultural intellectual property rights initiative, a month-long celebration basically to focus on the creativity, wisdom, innovation of indigenous people, ethnic groups, and local communities, and to create an advocacy for collective custodianship rights. The theme for this particular cultural IP month for this time is IP rights are human rights. And as part of this cultural IP month is also to generate a space for conversation, to be a catalyst for systems change, and to advocate for a new generation of right that acknowledges indigenous people, ethnic groups, local communities, self-determination and collective rights to protect their traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expressions, their governance systems, and the worldviews around it. So today we have one of the concluding sessions of the entire month, which would like to focus about the cultural IP rights and its relevance to India and how we can look forward to bring in the benefits to the last mile in a country which celebrates craftsmanship on a much larger scale. So welcome all of you, and I have a wonderful panel which I'll kind of take time to introduce briefly about all of them. They all are luminaries in their own right. To begin with, we have Padmaja Krishnan, a celebrated designer who's been working in the textile and fashion sector for the last 15 to 18 years. Her brand as itself is almost that much old, and someone who grew up in Calcutta, studied at NIF Delhi, and had a great amount of experience to start her brand. And there's a wonderful story with her, which I think she should be talking to us about, and how her Putli Di became her starting point to start a career and look at craft and the work that she did with them for a long time. We have Amrita Haldipur, a communication expert, someone who also specializes in marketing and brings in a whole lot of varied experiences and wants to spend her time looking at craft, looking at India's rich heritage and culture, and how to tell these stories back to a new generation, and how to ensure the entire ecosystem has a new way of connecting at the grassroots as well as to the consumer end. We have Juhi Pandey with us. Juhi has again been someone who's been in the system for the longest time and has spent various stints in various capacities at various places. And currently she heads the Center of Excellence for Khadi in the Northeast in Shillong, which also is the hotbed for India's craft and cultural space with so much of almost 70% of India's craft sector being flourishing in that part of the world. She also represents us from that part and can bring in a whole lot of insights into us. We have Professor Somesh Singh, needs less introduction in the world of craft. He's an academician who had very great role to play in multiple academic institutions, including the NID and the Apparel Management Institute in Delhi, before he ventured and decided to spend a good amount of time by creating something called India Craft Village. And as part of that effort, he's been organizing the India Craft Week for over 5 years now. I mean, 5 editions have been done so far, and has been kept alive multiple conversations. It's not just about textiles with his story. He's been representing and the right person to speak about craft in India at various levels and with this vast experience across the academic sector and as well as interacting with craft communities across the country. His organization also is on the World Craft Council panel, and we are very fortunate to have him on this panel this afternoon to speak about cultural IP rights and its relevance in this country. So this is the distinguished panels that we have this afternoon to speak about this entire thing that we want to look at it as to how cultural sustainability in India and how do you bring the benefit to the last mile. People who have worked with innovative measures to bring in a new language and space for handmade in India, all of them have their personal viewpoints of how cultural IP can work within a system like this in a country which has almost thousands of years of history going back to traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. And I think I would like to go back to Padmaja to start this conversation as to share her experiences, personal experiences, and how she feels 15 years later in 2023. All these conversations have become relevant from the time that she has started. Padmaja.
Thank you, Ramesh, for that wonderful introduction. And Yeah, hello everyone. Namaste from India. And yeah, on cultural IP rights and India and culture, where do I begin? Like Ramesh said, if I go back to, I have started my work with Katha. I kind of come from West Bengal in a way, a state in the eastern part of the country. And working with a single craft over many years and interacting at a grassroots. And I had the good fortune. I began my journey with crafts because I was asked to write a paper for UNESCO on the socio-cultural context of the craft. Very interestingly, unlike a lot of designers usually begin with the stitches or begin with making a product or whatever. Here, I was required to kind of research on it and write about it. So that really gave me a very, very different insight into the cultural IP rights and everything else, the socio-cultural context literally of the craft. So while it is one of the oldest recycled crafts of the world, Katha embroidery, and it's practiced by thousands of women in that part of the country. However, when I travel, this is literally, I can speak out of my experience. I'm not speaking out of a book. I'm not speaking out of any statistical data. But if you traveled across Bengal, even 16 years back or 15 years back, the reality at the grassroots is very different from the numbers that are speaking about the craft. One can say so many X meters are being made, and so much is being exported, and whatever some Japanese designers are buying, or Italian designers are buying. And Bengal has been a center of textiles for centuries. It's been, I think even today it is probably if there was a center of textiles in the world, Bengal could be that, of handmade textiles. It's really that way. And yet if you travel along the roads in the rural areas of Bengal, the poverty is quite abject and it's quite on the face. I mean, you don't see people really kind of living well. They don't have televisions in their house. I'm not saying television is a mark of progress or development, but I'm saying even to find a chair, table, and the basics is not easy. So where is really the IP rights? Where is the money coming? There is business. One can talk of numbers, but the grassroots reality was quite different. And I also got a chance to interact at different levels, while I was researching for this paper. So it's not just that I'm speaking to the buyers or the final retailers or of the craft, but also to the makers. And people are extremely talented there. It comes, and it's not a skill. I mean, like, I know all of us in the panel would agree, a craft is not a skill. It's not an industrial skill. It's a cultural heritage. It's something that comes and evolves over centuries. It's part of their birth, death, everything, So I feel that it's a very, very sensitive and a very fragile subject, what we have picked up today. And I must kind of really, speak a few words of appreciation for the people, for Monica, for the cultural IP, initiative, to kind of bring these on the forefront, these discussions, because, we have been under a Euro-patriarchal system, of domination, where everything is measured in terms of, how much have we sold and what are the numbers, which is correct. We need all of that. We absolutely need all of that, but craft is more than that. It can't end at that discussion. It begins at that. There is so much more that comes with it. So that is where I think the cultural IP is relevant, though there are no clear answers. In my personal experience, I feel, and hence that is not a reason to also be morbid. In fact, I think it's very challenging. It's very interesting that, in a world where modernity is a mix of everything, there are people who are driving to the end of the world, all of us to the end of the world. And then there are people who are trying to say we need to protect, like all that Ramesh mentioned before this, indigenous people, indigenous knowledge, culture, craft, skills, humanity, all of that. And maybe, a lot of us are here for that. And that's our soul call. And that's what we're doing. So these discussions are also our soul call. So And I feel the universe changes one at a time in each one of us. We are the universe. So when we change, even for ourselves, I do feel positive because at least that much has changed.
Move to Juhi to talk more about what she's doing currently and how that's a little part of the larger picture. Uh, Juhi.
Thank you, Ramesh. And actually, I'll take off from where Padmaja was trying to define craft, and it's very, very important now. And with the years that I have spent and understood as a designer, what role actually we as a design community should have, especially if we are working in the area of craft. So to begin with, craft was a way of life, or is a way of life for the practitioners of the craft in our traditional spaces. It's I take responsibility, and I also say that I'm guilty of being one of those people who at some point of time have commodified this word called craft, and hence created this entire space where today we are sitting and discussing something of this sort, where to begin with, whenever we started this whole idea of intervening at the traditional practitioners space and trying to bring those products or those processes into our space where of so-called the modern world or the urbanized world or so-called the educated world, is where we stopped being sensitive towards why those practices actually existed in those rural spaces. And all of us as designers and business people only went in to look at how we can literally take and not have a format of giving back, or how can we create a space to collaborate and work as in equal partnership. So these are much more important aspects that it was a slow process and a slow journey for a person like me to understand it. But today, this is what I do. Is I do it because the identity, the ownership, the leadership, if you want to work in the space of craft, has to be very, very much in the hands of the practitioner. Now, I'm calling them practitioners because I think when we use the word artisans, we've already, and today, because of, again, the commercialization of the space, the word artisan, when said, already makes you mold them into a frame of a person who's sad and needs survival and needs hand holding and all of those things. So the word has to change, and I've been wondering what we can actually say they are, and they're practitioners. And then the aspect of the cultural systems coming into foray, the fact that in our country, and we are probably the only country in the world that has most of its living craft still alive, is because all these practices were a way of life, and hence they are an intrinsic part even today of our cultural system. Though I live in an urban space, and most of us do, the moment we have any, and if we are connected to our families which have any format of religious practice, there is one element of that craft practice that we came from, our roots go back to, does still come in the foray. Our mothers will say you need to get an unstitched cloth and dye it in haldi before your father or your husband or your brother wears it and sits in the puja. It's a mark of purity, and hence there is always been that connect to natural dyes. So we've forgotten those aspects, but the thing is, that's why I feel proud of being an Indian also, that we have somewhere maintained these practices, which also give us a certain level of identity. But it's this entire practice of being rooted to our backgrounds, our own communities, that will continue these craft practices. And yes, we need to maybe on a larger commercial scale and larger uh, uh, global scale think of these aspects of intellectual property, etc. But again believe that as if we are facilitators or designers or professors or marketing people, etc., that whoever is sitting here on this panel, we have to first start from a space of respect where when we walk into working with any of these communities, we already know and we first believe that the ownership of any of these practices lies in them. And I will do my due diligence of when I work, produce, write, promote, publicize, that I will not forget that practitioner. I will not forget that practicing community. And it is just that we first need to bring into all our way of working before we can actually sit and maybe make preambles and constitutions and policies around intellectual property and cultural identity. And I'll stop after another minute. And I'm only saying this because for the last 7 years, I have not lived in a city technically. I live and work with the people that I work with the practitioners in their spaces, in their homes. I face every possible challenge that they are facing today in their working spaces to really understand what we can do. Because, and actually realize how inept we are technically, even though we have all the education in the world. And, I go back to our institution, and Somesh will know about this, where even when we set up an institution like NID way back in 1969, the first thing that Charles and Ray Ames did was to travel the entire country of India to really understand where was design required in India. And then the institution was set up. And I think that's what if we are today talking about cultural, intellectual property, blah, 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 sorry, because I told you when we had a conversation, I don't understand the word or the terminology. I'm very dumb. I'm a villager, but I understand what is happening at the ground, at the village level. And that's what I'd like to bring here. So if we want to get there, we first probably need to bring in many more practitioners to speak about this to us and understand from their perspective, what do they understand about their culture today? What is their definition of intellectual properties? Because we're all talking technically for them. So it's just a question that I want to put forward and, continue this discussion and learn, because I need to go back also to those same places of practice and continue what I do better, maybe through learning from all of you. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Juhi, for those wonderful words and also giving interesting insights and looking at drawing different parallels where we are wanting to define artisans in a new way. And throughout your conversations, you've been calling them practitioners, which also kind of throws open a whole new gamut of how do you look at the craftsman or the artisan community way too differently than just being executors of craft labor. Or I think I can have those conversations when Somesh comes back with his insights, unedited or uncensored, as I would put it, because he's someone who never minces his word. But before that, let's have Amrita, who can give us a kind of an outsider view, as well as someone who's done a whole lot of projects in the last couple of years in the post-COVID scenario as well, to share her experience as to what she feels all about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ramesh, and lovely meeting and listening to everyone share their perspectives. I think for me, I just wanted to keep it short at this point, and then of course we can have more longer chat. But so I've been a marketer for like over 18 years, but I think my interest in and how I understand the world of craft and the world of handmade and the world of artisans was very early. When in my 20s, I used to travel a lot across India. Like I completely relate to what Juhi just said. I think one of the things I have in my own experience realized is my introduction to the world of artisans and craft was not so much from fashion, but was more from the world of travel and tourism. The more I traveled, and went to the interiors, I realized, oh my God, there's so much in India. And how is it that we don't know so much about while staying in the cities? And it was more of a personal, of course, I mean, fashion is a very, I mean, it was at that point in time more of a personal, inclination. But it was my work and, that really made me travel a lot across India to the interiors. And I used to ask myself a lot of these questions that, here I am marketing, the work of brands, and I'm bringing global brands to India, and like, but there was a lot of conversation about cultural tourism. So there was a point in time when I was managing Tourism Australia, and I remember back in the day, I pitched a story to Times of India on cultural tourism, and we did this big story. And when I pitched it, it became like a front page story, and it felt a little fast to me at that point in time, because I'm like, in my own country, there's so much of cultural tourism. There's so much of cultural richness. What has stopped me from talking about it? Why has it taken me to look somewhere outside and then realize we have it in our own country, right? So I think that was one of my first, like, I mean, in the context of the conversation of cultural IP or cultural, like for me, it was tourism which really introduced me. And I think thereafter, another point which has been, spoken about is, so in the middle of COVID, I had a great opportunity through Raha that Radhika and I had co-founded, to really work very extensively with artisans. And as it was like a very middleman economy sort of a space that we were coming from, to really bridge the gap, because they had, a lot of their marketplaces were not in physical form, and we were trying to find the buyers from the private spaces. And in such sort of a way, one of the things that came up was in the second lockdown, a lot of artisans that we were in touch with, they said, we don't want any donations. We don't want, I mean, it's all helpful, ration kits. It's really nice that there's so many people helping us. But for the first time in my own experience, I saw how many of them said that we just want to be able to sell what we have created. And we want a direct interface with, we want people to know we are the people behind this, and that actually led us to really join hands with Kasha and Loom in hand, and sort of form the Artisan Shop, which was a direct insight, where it was an e-commerce platform where they created, they sold what they had created, and they sold it at a price that they put forth. So and thereafter also my exposure with artisans, I feel largely there is a certain skill and a craft that from generations they have had. And I think it's not right for me as someone who belongs to a brand or from a marketing perspective come and say, you know what, this is a demand, and I want you to make this. In fact, I need to first understand what they are best at, right? And it's my job to find a way to be able to go further and sell it, then keep coming to them with I mean, it's easier said than done, but it's not right for me to keep going to artisans and say, hey, this is the market trend and you should be able to make this, when I'm perhaps talking to like a fourth generation artisan who has only learned a certain kind of a skill, right? It's our job and the ecosystem. I think, Ramesh, that's what we were talking some time ago, right? Like, what's the job of the ecosystem? That is what the job is. All of us need to come together to find how can we, because at the end of the day, I feel what an artisan is doing is what a designer is doing in a, has all the access, like, the designers that we know of, their craft, it's the same sort of a leverage we need to be able to give to the artisans. It's just that we need to bring and empower them and bring their skill sets in a way that they also feel that, okay, there's something that I'm wanting to do, there's something that I want to create, and there are people here with whom I can do new things. So I think those are some initial thoughts I feel, because I don't know who can own this IP. I'm not an expert in that area, but I do feel that the voice at the grassroots needs to be heard, and it's our job, and all of us who need to find ways to bring their stories to the consumers. Because one thing is for sure, consumers want to know who are the makers behind these products, and their identity is very, very attached to what we go and share with the consumers, right? So we can't sort of just keep them and say, oh, the other last mile. We need to talk about them. So I think those are some initial thoughts I would like to share.
So thank you, Amrita, for putting in your words there. So we move on to Professor Somesh Singh.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me. Uh, this whole topic is a very complex topic. And the answer is much more complexer. So I have no idea that whether, we will be really able to put across a perspective. But let's understand, from a very simple point of view. So I'm not going to really talk about my experience, that I will do later. But let us look at, in terms of what's been the evolution in terms of economy, right? So from agrarian, we moved to industrial, which is manufacturing, and then we moved to service. In 90s, we opened to something which we call as knowledge economy, and we have now moved to the in 21st, 22nd, whatever century we call. We have now been into creative economy, which means that creativity is the major force for driving the businesses. So whatever you see in terms of startup, whatever you see in terms of new ideas, emerging every now and then. And post-COVID, a lot of new ideas have emerged, new type of businesses have evolved. So as a result, what happened is a lot of ideas have originated. Hence, there is a need to protect those ideas. Correct? So that is the very simple and straight point which is required. Now, from intellectual properties point of view, if you look at, I had very interesting experience at an ID. I remember, when I joined an ID, we were setting up a complete division on intellectual property rights, and a lot of discussion happened. And one of the very interesting discussion which happened was around the medicine industry, because we were looking at models, and we were looking at what models are available. So from the pharmaceutical industry, if you look at, there are two types of patents which mostly apply. One is product, second is process. So what happened is, if you have taken a process patent, you cannot copy the same process. If you have taken a product, of course, yes, you cannot, copy the product for sure. But interesting point is, because of, because of why, we need to really go for intellectual property. What happens is, if you look at these companies, nature of these companies, they make a huge investment in terms of building those resources, right? So their 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of research R&D will go into making those products, and they need to sell those products. So therefore, they need to protect, and hence they are able to sell into the world. And also, if you look at intellectual property, it's very geographical. There is no global patent, there is no global trademark that applies. Each country has their own law, each country has their own, mechanism of protecting and preserving it. So interestingly, when we started those understandings, we were looking at film students in NID who were making films. So they will, usually come and say that we can only use 15 seconds of the music because, it is free of IP. So more than 15 seconds, if you use the music, then you have to pay for IPRS license and all that, what happens. Interesting point is, there was established mechanism in different sectors and different industries. But the moment you talk about craft, there is no such practice. There is no such practice, right? And why there is no such practice is also because I was telling, we were having a discussion in the afternoon, Ramesh and me. So I was telling that a simple example, I made few designs. I remember in 2020, I made a product called Co-Vest. So when I went for patenting it, design registration, so they said, okay, patenting is a long process. You will have to wait for an year. I said, we don't have that much of time. What is the quicker method? They said, okay, you can go for design registration. Design registration is very quick. It takes around 7 to 10 days. And you will get a design registration, so nobody can copy your design. I said, okay, go ahead, please do that. So I had to, of course, hire a law firm, so lawyer. So which means you have to pay a fees to lawyer. Then you have to pay the fees of design registration, which is 1,500 rupees per design, right? So any number of design you start paying for, or you want to register, you can go for it. So I got my registration. Then I was thinking in perspective of artisans. I said, 1,500 I can pay for, 10 designs. These people who are creating 100 designs every month, if 1,500 per design, what is the kind of cost, they will end up paying, for such a, design registration. Now, okay, if they design register also their design, Who is the law firm which is going to really do on their behalf? What is the money that is going to be charged by them? So minimum to minimum, even if someone wants to register 100 designs and a law firm is being involved, they will charge 1 lakh rupees at least minimum, right, for doing that. So 1 lakh plus 1 lakh 50,000, 2 lakh 50,000. Now, despite that, there is no guarantee that nobody will copy that. So what's the point of spending 2 lakh 50,000, and whether artisan or any kind of organization will be able to really afford those kind of things? It's completely not possible. Second part is that government has moved into a sphere of intellectual property. If you go to Government of India's website on intellectual property, you see a very clear cut demarcation in terms of geographical indication, right? That is also now under the intellectual properties. So GI is now what the government has been insisting on in terms of majority, because they say that GI is what is more relevant for the community-based practices, which means craft is one part, but even though there are some other products which is being made into a certain zone of India, you can still apply for GI. So GI-based system has started in most of these places. And interestingly, what happened is that geographical indication is what is now being also accepted worldwide. So what happens is, suppose the consumers wanting to buy products in the US or Europe, etc., they can look at a GI product, and if it is GI tag, they are assured that okay, this is the original product which is belonging to those regions. So if you look at this is very technical sphere of things which is actually happening into the intellectual property sphere of craft sector. Now, point is, who is going to facilitate it? The biggest question. Okay, there is a IP, there is IP law, which is all written very categorically. Now, there are craft practitioners, as we were saying, craft practitioners, craft makers, artisans, then craft organizations, NGOs, social organizations. Now, point is, who will be basically interfacing between these laws that is being created versus the organizations which are actually working in those sectors, and the artisans who are the real makers or who are the end creators, correct? Now, who's going to really facilitate this entire chain? Is there a body? For example, if you look at, there is a, for music licensing, there is a body, right, which issues you IPRS license. For anything which you want to use the music, you have to buy that, and then you can use that music. And then that money is being collected by a single body, and then it is distributed to the people whose music is being used, right? It's a very interesting mechanism which is there. Now, suppose within craft, now you say, okay, now look at D2C brands, look at e-commerce brand, retailers. There are so many people, right? Now, they are using the designs of each of these artisans. A, have you been seeing any credit to those artists? We don't. I mean, most of 99% of the website you go, you will not even find the name of the makers. Forget anything else. Nobody is mentioning it because they are insecure. They believe कि वो नाम डालेंगे ना तो दूसरे भी उसको जाके उसके पास पहुंच जाएंगे, and they will also start making those products. So what will be our exclusivity? So we can't mention the product of the maker and things like that. So that is one. Point number two is that what type of intellectual property IP creation you are sharing between the company, designer, or the artisan. Is there a sharing mechanism? Is there an agreement? Have you ever signed even a page of agreement with these people? उनको समझा के कि artisan में, look, we are working with you. You are artisan. You are not a craft labor, which Ramesh was talking about. Craft labor basically means simple point. If I give my design, if I give my material, I give all my sensibilities, and I tell an artisan, look, you just have to make this. They're craft labors. But when we say artisan, which means the first three words is art, which means that they are going to bring their sensibilities, they are going to use their skills, they are going to use their design ideas, and hence they will be the original creators of those textile, basket, whatever products. And then when designers working with it, they will use those textiles into garment, etc. So which means 50% of the job is being done by those artisans, 50% of the job is being done by designers, and then the product sees the market, and then it is being sold, right? So this is a simple channel. Now, in this, there are 3 points which one has to answer. One, is the IP sharing equal between both the parties, between designer and the artisan? Right? Is there a legal framework that is being worked out between them? Question mark. First question mark. Second is that when you are actually talking about this all over the world, where from website to your articles in Vogue to everywhere, is the artisan also getting the equal share of information or attention in those areas? So that is question mark 2. Question mark 3 is that after all this, when the garment or the product is being sold, are you sharing a part of your profit with these people? Right? You're not. So the point is, what sharing actually are we talking about? I mean, what IP sharing we are talking about? I mean, it is just a myth, which we are actually talking about. If we cannot do these 3 activities and we cannot treat our artisan as a co-creator or as a partner in the process, are we really bringing a value to the entire whole system? And also, why I'm saying value system, because what happens is most often we use a term called supply chain management, right? So supply chain management is a very mechanical term. But if we change the supply chain management to value, value chain, right? The word changes here. Value means is anybody or everybody into that chain is adding some value to the entire thing. That is very important. But the first and foremost question is, have we really created a framework in which everybody is fitting into, and there is an equal IP sharing between all the stakeholders who are involved into co-creation of any kind of product?
Thank you, Somesh, for those wonderful insights and raising the right pertinent questions related to what we're talking about. Coming into a space like something like this, where there is the craftsman, there is a lot of history and culture and heritage revolving around each of these practices, also part of an ecosystem which traditionally has been nurturing it and has been, kind of creating spaces for it, which today sees a global market for it. For decades, best international brands or the leading international names in the fashion world have been coming to India and sourcing. So that's been a different kind of outsourcing of technical skills or the knowledge that our country has kind of preserved for a longer time, and it's also coming into a stage where it's being threatened because the next generation is not virtually coming to practice it. We talk about numbers, as Padmaja was again saying, that we were talking about all the numbers in the world of it's showing a positive growth. Government statistics say that the last decade there has been almost a 5-fold leap in the exports of handicrafts of this country. Right? Again, the question rises as to what is the actual numbers and how, if at all, if that is a promising picture that we talk about, how has it trickled down to the last person who's been in the process of making it? Does it actually happen? Or if it's not, where is this whole thing, leaking out that the benefits don't come back to the practitioners as we talk about? Is there a way to kind of protect that space? When something has been, as you said, the GI marks is what replaces or what kind of complements the IP rights for artisans. How is it being implemented? Or if it just ends up being a registered trademark or the social factor that there is a GI protection for various things. And in the last 5 to 8 years, there has been more than 200 trademarks being issued to various crafts within the country in various sectors, from growing rice to textiles to you name the craft, they all have been given these protection. But is that enough to bring back some benefits down to the traditional communities which has been practicing these crafts? It remains a big question mark. Is there a way where we were talking about collaborations and the word partnership came forward, that how equal is the partnership between an artisan or a craft community and a designer community or a producer company, which engages the multiple chains in the entire system to take the craft to a global marketplace? Padmaja, do you have experiences of where you had to sit down, make them understand the law, or was there kind of an arrangement between you and the craft community of bringing certain protection to them? Because I believe that one of the first embroiderers of Kanta who you worked with, and because we started the whole thing, was just receiving 600 rupees a month, which is less than $10, right? And the journey has been 15 years forward from then. How have you imbibed or brought in certain value systems to protect the rights of the artisans who are collaborating on your project? Is there a written word, or is it trust and understanding that you work with them.
I feel when we are coming across again, like what we said about, giving them credit, getting their consent and giving them compensation, So when I started my journey with Katha was, well, like I said, where I wrote the paper, but thereafter there was this one artisan who said that, just give me a job. And I was like, I do not even want to work with embroideries, like I was interested in other things. And I said, that's not my area of interest, but she said, I carry water and I get paid 600 rupees. So if you pay me 100 rupees more, I'm willing to work. Which I just thought was just, it's a demonstration of how deplorable the situation is, how impoverished we all are, despite all schooling, education, whatever, we are impoverished that we are not able to flourish together. We are not able to create a system where she can flourish and I can flourish. And, and I feel that this is somewhere the fault of I may probably be carrying the conversation in a very tangential way, but it is really the root is, our whole education system, which kind of clearly defines, who is ahead, who is above, who is below. Somebody from the village, somebody working with the hands is automatically seen by today's highly digital age as someone who is below you, period. It doesn't matter. Like I remember having a craft conversation like this one-on-one in Hyderabad a few years ago, and there was this fantastic master weaver of ikat. And the kind of work he's doing is really what probably computer engineers can't do today, it's just so intricate and so beautiful, but it's not recognized, and his son is not willing to do that anymore. So for me, my connection with Katha was, I started with that one woman and I said, okay, fine, you just come. I didn't have any, kind of a business goal out of having an embroiderer, come over. And, we started off in a very organic space, and we started creating textile, almost like kind of canvases. And I also realized, like, what we've discussed, what Somesh has said, what Juhi has said, is that, craft is a very human response. So I worked on multiple things. One is to compensate her way better than what she was asking, not at 100 rupees more, but at doubling the situation to start with, and that time I was just 1 year out of, my design college. But I felt that, if one can spend on Starbucks coffee, one can rather do this. That's what happens in cities. But we actually are not trained to see it like that. We say that, this is a whatever craftsman, artisan, practitioner, but, end of the day, she's illiterate. So she doesn't deserve any more money. That is the system that we unfortunately live in. And thereafter, I work towards also kind of bringing a sense of dignity in the craft, where we also explored a lot of stitches. Like, Katha is a very complex craft. I would, probably, I don't want to get into too much of the details, but it is one simple running stitch and where you can do so much of innovation. But unfortunately, in the last 15 or 18 years of working with crafts, I feel a lot of times when designers get into crafts, we probably bring about its downfall faster. As a cultural entity, we may be building better businesses. We may be getting compensation also at best. At best, what we do is to get, like economic compensation. But in terms of really nurturing the craft as a living being, we actually throttle it even faster. Because craft and money are two different things. It's like, it's like telling, I don't know, I mean, I can say from my experience, it's like telling a mother that you will get better paid if you look after your child better. It doesn't work like that. I feel it's a natural response. A craft is a natural response to society, culture. So anyways, to touch a few interesting points, I think apart from compensation, where I definitely said that I have to do it way better than what the surrounding system is doing. The second thing which I worked upon is to bring about a sense of joy in working in our little studio, where we had 10, 11 women, but we said that let's actually innovate, because most, practitioners today have also given up on innovating, because, all this intervention from designers, they say, aap batao kya banana hai. This aap batao kya banana hai is like, where they're turned into industrial labor. I won't even call it craft labor. This is industrial labor. It's like, you define and say, and then you kind of tell them you work so many hours, you deliver in so much time. So there is really no, protection of one's, so they would also not draw. Interestingly, in Bengal, the practitioners or the artisans there, they actually say, "Ek drawing artist aayega." So, "Kaun drawing artist aayega?" I said, "You are the artist." Katha by nature is a response. Unlike Fulkari and a lot of other embroidery, here you actually draw what you see. You draw what you aspire for. It's very, very organic. It's very, very intuitive and soulful. But here, where we've gotten into a practice of aap batao, koi aur batao. So we had very interesting exchanges within the studio, within the practice, where we said that, what are your personal aspirations? So, when some of the women said, this was 14 years back, they said, "Oh, we want to own a cell phone." So we actually had a whole series of cell phones embroidered, because we said that it's not relevant to just embroider peacocks and elephants, because peacocks and elephants is like kind of actually freezing a craft in some century. Aaj ki duniya mein, what is it that we all aspire for? So it's at various levels. We also innovated a lot of stitches within Katha, like various kinds of like Nakshi Katha, which is more Bangladesh based, is not practiced in Bengal. That was a practice that I actually worked in bringing back. With completely women who have not practiced craft in the past. Like, unlike the first two women who joined with me, collaborated with me, the rest of the women, we actually kind of said, "You come, we'll train you." Because staying in Kolkata, there were not so many people who actually knew the craft as Nakshi Katha. What people are doing in Bengal today is a very commercialized version of Katha, and kilometers of it. And nobody gets paid. I don't know whether it gets sold. It's all quite mad. So I feel that this whole thing of IP, of compensation, of respect is at such a human level. It's also at such a personal level that I do not know whether laws will really help. If somebody told me that, "Padmaja, you have to practice better," I will probably find ways of escaping that practice. But if that's what I am, and that's what I think that human level has to come up in each one of us. And we have to understand that we are not doing it to empower somebody else. It's that whole concept which we hear of, any native community will talk of always flourishing together, which we have
Padmaja gives,
in modern society.
right. So when you give this views, I'll also bring in Amrita, who's will be leading this conversation shortly. So if I can have her back for a few minutes to give her point of view as to what she's been hearing from that perspective as to where this whole conversation and what she's been able to grasp.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. It was very, very insightful, but I think I just wanted to leave something with picking up on especially what Juhi and Padmaja, I mean, just everything that's been discussed. It reminds me of a case. So typically as when we're in the world of building brands, there's something that we follow is like brand guidelines, right? So which helps us to take it forward, so we know what are the do's and don'ts, and allow ourselves enough freedom to be able to do things as we are building the brand. And I think this is one of my just like a perspective that I feel I want to add is if we had more, like I just especially feel in the last 3 years or so, a little over 3 years, especially in my immediate networks, I know a lot of us who have come to the world of working with artisans a lot more than, there have been many who've been working in this industry for many, many years, but there are many newcomers, right, who are coming with fresh ideas, who are trying to build new things, or trying to find different, creative solutions to sort of, make the creative economy stronger. And I think some sort of guidelines would be very, very helpful because what happens is that I'll give an example. And this really was while I was consulting a social entrepreneur in the last, this happened around 2 years ago. We were renaming her brand name, and her brand had the word Khadi in it. And as much as she had already done, I mean, it wasn't Khadi, but there was something in it, and there was the word Khadi, and she was sued by the government in spite of doing such fabulous work. And I think, so it wasn't just that, she had to really go through a lot of, there was like, we were a bunch of us sort of consulting, trying to figure what were the next steps. And I think that was when it hit me, why, if only we knew the guidelines, if she knew the guidelines, she would have known how to build a lot of things around it, right? Which, because this ecosystem has so many different stakeholders. So how do we protect the IP? How do we build the guidelines? I think that is my two bits to this, that if we had some sort of guidelines, it would help a lot of us, right from the governments to the state governments or the central government or whoever is involved, to individual players who come to contribute to making something with the creative economy players and artists especially.
We forget that, we actually function in an ecosystem. So ecosystem means if there is an artisan community, there is also an industry, there's also a government, there's also customers, there is, so ecosystem has so many stakeholders. Now, from their point of view, if you look at, everybody is actually a party, into the entire thing. So I will tell you something as a designer. For example, at NID, I learned to make an agreement, right? I used to make agreement with the clients. Now, what happened is, whenever we are signing agreement with the big companies, Ramesh, you will find that they will send their agreement format. Now, I already have a shared an agreement format with the company, but they are not honoring that. They are sending their own format and telling that our legal department has made this format, you sign this, right? Okay, you send the format, but that is not applicable because it will go through legal, it will go through administration. They have so much of, the layers. So the point is, even though, for an example, suppose an artisan, I'll give you a very practical example. Suppose an artisan wants to work with a company, which is a big corporate, correct? And the corporate wants to pick up the design, they want to manufacture into a scale, and they want to sell through their channels. They will, Ramesh, get into an agreement, correct? Whether artisan likes it or not, whether the organization likes it or not, they will get into an agreement. And if the artisan or these, organizations which are supporting artisan cannot draft that agreement or draft those kind of things, I can tell you that the corporates will go away. They will say, okay, that's not possible. We cannot get into anything, informally. We have to get into things formally. So hereby making it is important that if we want that more and more corporate organizations, industry to actually partner with craft sector, one has to look at a legal framework. And I think what Monica is doing at the ground is a very important activity. But at the same time, I think, creating our own set of, legal framework will take time, and recognition and all that will become an issue. It is important that maybe, with the government itself, if few of the people who are working on the ground, they can work with government hand in hand, they can work with Ministry of Textiles and tell them that, look, there are laws which we have seen, there are GI which is there is IP law which is there, but we want these kind of tweakings that can happen. And this will become more, become more friendly to the people who are actually working in these areas, and it will help them much more. So with that, what happens is, once that legal framework comes into place, more and more industry will be very happy to partner. I am really facing those problems, Somesh, I can't tell you. Artisan says, okay, we want to work with Tata. Now, the moment you talk to somebody in Tata, the first thing they will say, okay, what is the legal framework under which we are going to work? So first send a proposal. The Choloji proposal, artisan will not make a proposal, so we will make that proposal. Second is, after the proposal is submitted, they'll say, okay, let's sign an agreement. Now, signing an agreement, again, artisan is not able to do. That again, we will do. Third is, after the agreement, who's going to monitor the entire process to ensure that the agreement goes into a certain flow? That also you have to monitor. So the point is, without that, nobody is going to work. So it is important that we must look at the legal framework. And another submission is that, while I understand that GI and other things will have a lot of flaws, one has to understand that GI was only introduced in 2003. It was, slated in 1999. And after 4 years of working, it was launched in 2003, which is very recent. And it is not fully understood, neither by the policymakers nor by the implementers, right? Nobody's understood anything. The point is, they have brought in so that there is more discussion that can happen, and such things go through a process of refinement, right? And then there will be a model which will be coming as a laid model. But laid model ke baad mein, once that thing comes in, what is the second step? The second step is implementation. So which means, suppose if somebody is violating GI, which court, right? Or which judiciary one is going to go to appeal, make an appeal, correct? So, so there are so many questions which are related to implementation and on ground, implementation, which is not still being, addressed. So it's a long journey, and I think we should be a little patient. But at the same time, we can give continuous feedback, etc. And I'm sure that something better will come up. So it's a very very complex thing to work on. So these are my some thoughts on that.
Thank you so much for structuring it down in a positive manner and seeing it where these things can coexist and is needs to be implemented back. Juhi, if you have to add to it.
I think what Somesh has said is very relevant, but even before we reach, say, the practitioner's end or at the ground, what you are talking about, Somesh, first needs to become a form of practice amongst us as community people,
Absolutely.
as social development workers, as designers, as corporations, as foundations, NGOs, Khadi, whatever you are. Like, we ourselves don't know this, right? Or we ourselves don't follow any of these rules or regulations. Like, when you are saying the company will not come to the practitioner and sign the agreement if there is no legal framework, I also believe that the company also needs to understand the practitioner's way of working. It's like, for many, many years, we've been struggling with the aspect of certification for the organic cotton work that our handloom weavers do, which is actually absolutely organic, more than the organic cotton that people are buying from Arvind and Ashima and the likes. Yeah. But what is the problem? That the organic certification body that we have in India, they have created their entire framework on a centralized working system. So when they bring those parameters and come to the village, they're like, "आप तो काम ही नहीं कर सकते, आपकी factory कहाँ है, आपका godown कहाँ है?"
Correct.
And I'm trying to tell the guy, I said, "Sir, do you realize यदि वो आदमी अपने घर में बैठ के कपड़ा बना रहा है, it's his house. His house will be the cleanest, most protected, most hygienic space because he lives there. His children are grown up there. And how much more hygiene and organic do you want the space to say that the guy is not making organic cotton?" But so it's a dual thing where, yes, the government needs to come in. Yes, these different certification bodies need to come in, but there also needs to be a dual understanding. And I think the first level of understanding and sensitization has to come into our community, our larger community, that these are certain rules and guidelines that we need to follow and stuff. So, like, I would say, even when, if I can make this comment here, Somesh, it's like the craft week that you do, and I was there last year. Why do we need to have a separate space where the artisans and practitioners are, and why do we had a space where we gave so much importance to a Udhyam and all the other designers? We need to bring them under one roof and let them all have their stalls and have their booths and have their work in one space, because then we are already starting to create that synergy. We're already bringing them onto a singular platform. The moment we say that's the craft space, that is the designer brand space or whatever, I don't know what the other thing was called, but we are already creating those boundaries, those demarcations. So it's also us that have to start figuring out. Like, I went for the AD show, same thing. You've got all these fancy design studios, and at the back, you are, keeping one row of craftspeople just to show we are respecting the craft. But you put
Juhi,
them in the
I have
back.
to intercept and ask you something more before we are running short of time.
Yeah,
I just have a very specific thing to ask you more when we're talking about rights and everything. Is pertaining to the usage of the word khadi, right? Now, khadi is kind of a highly debatable space, and the usage of the word and its copyright and trademark and all is in a good amount of it is in a public space. When the government of India could not get hold of the trademark for the word khadi, they brought in an amendment in the parliament for the usage of the word, which now designers or producers cannot use it without the licensing system. So I need to go back to a government authorized system if I have to use the word and get its certification. Has this entire thing in the last 3 years of since its implementation actually helped the purest khadi makers in this country, or it has been deterrent for designers or anybody else to actually take it forward?
So as a practitioner, I believe that it has not made any difference anywhere. Okay. for the designer or for the actual Khadi institutions, etc. And I would just choose to say that, these are certain policies that when you have a certain level of power, you can create. But I can tell you one thing, Khadi or not, if you have made a unique product today, you have found the market. You don't need these labels. And there are enough and more examples of this that we all know of, including the entire transformation that you have seen in Kutch, in Uttarakhand, down in South, with other NGOs who very, very easily worked without these labels and tags or certifications and have found themselves a market across the world. So, it's a very political debate, and I understand you will question me today because I work on a project which is so intrinsically involved. And these are conversations that we have also brought in whenever we can with the commission end. And it is something that we would like to see if, it can become a democratic word again. But at this point of time, what we've also realized being a part of the project, it's fine. Like I have started telling designers, okay, and I may lose my project after this conversation, but I don't really care. But I've told designers, you go and buy Khadi from ABC Khadi institution. You bring it back, and when you are tagging your garment, if you write that this fabric is from ABC Khadi institution of Kolkata, blah, 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 nobody will catch you.
I have a point of opinion here.
You've already established that you use Khadi fabric.
So I will give a very, though we are running short of time, I'll give a personal example of, as Save the Loom, the organization, we've been working with the Khadi sector for the last 4 years and been trying to do various projects to highlight the aspect of how the entire system works in Kerala. So I had a conversation before we did this project 4 months back, where we got 15 designers to work with the handwoven handspun in Kerala, and we still kind of have come back to a stage where we are happy to state it not as Khadi, but handspun handwoven is a term which we now trying to kind of build upon the work that we do, right? So at that time, I had to call back the state director for KVIC in Kerala and ask him that I am buying this entire material which is being supplied to designers from a KVIC institutions, and do you have a problem if I'm going to call it the word Khadi in my work? Because I'm going to celebrate a collaboration between the Khadi artisan and designers. He says, no. The moment you take something from KVIC, I said, I'm having a certification and I'm buying it, though I'm on the board of advisors, and also taking a written statement that I'm taking this many amount of meterage from you, and that is what is being developed into made-up garments. He said, the moment it's converted into something, then you lose the right to tag it back to KVIC because you do not have a license to do it. He says, very simple, go on a website, register, it's 5,000 rupees. Take a license if you want to retail or further retail any KVIC product or to usage of the word Khadi. So I've got into a legal rigmarole that do I work to the furtherance of what I'm trying to do? So we conveniently had to rely back and go with the word of handspun, handwoven, and use the terminology. It tends to be a loss of interest because the moment I use Khadi, which has been hundreds of years of philosophy that we have inherited, when I'm being deprived to use it, though I'm following the functionality, I'm procuring it from the rightful source, I'm buying it from a certified agencies which is working, and they are KVIC institutions for the longest time. But the moment I'm converting it into a product, I'm also being deprived of using the benefits of that. So it remains only with when KVIC retails through its stores can the value be there. He said the moment you buy a commercial quantity, he says the whole law is also in such a way that I cannot buy commercial quantity of KVIC and resell or repurpose. So
okay,
the laws, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sorry,
we figured it out. And the fact is, for whatever reason, and that we've not yet gotten to, it's just a year and a half into this project, but I'm very interested in this aspect, honestly. So it's better to be in the system and understand what is really the true reason for these kind of stringent laws and regulations to such a democratic word. Believe me, and I'm just saying it as someone who may fall into trouble later, but that's what my job is. If you the Khadi institution, what I have understood, who you buy fabric from, okay, is actually an independent cooperative NGO or something like that that they are registered under, and they have Khadi registration. Okay. But since years, because that Khadi registration, all the product coming out of them, be it the textile or the soap or the agarbatti, is all Khadi, is all handmade. Okay, so the fabric is hand spun, hand woven. The other stuff is all handmade with organic materials, blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling designers like you or organizations like you, I know you want to cash on the word Khadi. Okay, let's all also be very honest about
Not cash. We don't want to encash the word. The whole thing is to
So
protect.
don't use it, but use their name. So Save the Loom has used the fabric of Padiyur Khadi Samiti to create this product by, say, Padmaja Krishnan. Okay. Khadi will never even get to know about it. And you have used the name. You've used the name. You've not used Khadi. You've used the name. Okay. Now, Pandey is a Pandit, but all Pandeys are not Pandits. Correct? So similarly,
But
from a very
if
legal perspective, and this I can tell you, even a lawyer may sitting here.
No, we have intelligently used the words. It comes from a Gandhi Smarka Grama Seva Kendram. Has no word Khadi in it. Which is also right that it's a KVIC registered institution. But there is certain fear which sets into a designer, like somebody like Padmaja or Karishma Shani or many other designers who has been working
This
with
is the problem. I'm telling you what the fear comes in because you're not able to just easily find that easy solution that you want, where I should just be allowed to use the word. Now it is almost where this is a new movement that we may all have to start working with in the design community, where the movement is about seeing how do we bring back this word as a to become a democratic word, rather than just blaming the system. Will Karishma or Padmaja or you leave your work for 1 month and sit on a dharna outside the KVIC chairman's office in Delhi and demand this? No, nobody from the design community thinks about these things. They just want to blame it on the other person, which is fine because you are more into the space where you want to make your product and sell further. Absolutely got it. Hence, let's find a smarter solution. We are all designers and creative people. So if we want to work as a collaborator, why don't we just utilize the name and just say it's one hand woven Ram Seva Mandal in Padiyur for Padmaja Krishnan or for Karishma Sani or for whoever else you want to. Yeah. And that cannot stop anybody. It cannot stop you because you're collaborating with a organization which is a cooperative or an SHG and they have Khadi registered.
Professionals who understand law inside out. तो वो बहुत सारे ऐसे एग्जांपल्स और इनसाइट देने वाले हैं जिससे काफी फायदा होने वाला है. And then the last thing I'm going to tell you is that India Craft Week is finally registered. So if we have discussions, I think it is going to really change the whole.
It's wonderful to have these conversations where we talk about sustainability in a larger context, which is the buzzword now, and then cultural sustainability plays a far greater role and a maybe a fundamental role in deciding what sustainability means. Similarly, cultural IP is far more significant, and exactly as how Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative has been celebrating this month to create largely these conversations and awareness. As over the last 30 days, and this is I think the second year in a row where Monica has been driving this entire initiative to create larger conversations, awareness through various mediums, not just in India but across the world. And she's also been taking up these matters with the WIPO and other organizations which can bring a global framework and legal discourses which can probably bring in a time where it's not still structurally in a country where legal rights and legal issues are not so kind of binding in terms of paper, but we still work on the value system and the ethical practices, which all of us have been emphasizing. That's the relationship between a creator, a designer, or the terminologies that we use for people who come from learned backgrounds to define themselves can coexist and create a system which can kind of translate down that the last mile benefactor is the people who are engaged in these crafts, be it the artisan, be it the dyer, be it the guy who does the street walking, or any of those people. You call them the allied professionals to a system, also gets their rightful compensation to work rightful credit for the work which they do, and also it's protected to the ecosystem which it has been nourished for thousands of years. And we should kind of take these conversations forward. And I can have the concluding words from Monica. And for sure, we will have these technical session as we suggested. It's a great way forward. And I think for another 5 months from now, we will have the India Craft Week. So we are inviting ourselves, CIPR is inviting itself to bring.
You guys need no invitation. Come on.
You
I
bring
was
in
going to say that, Ramesh, just be shameless and land up there. Somesh cannot say no. That's what
I am officially putting on record because he is going to bring in the largest group of craftsmen to one platform in Delhi. And what better place than to bring the bureaucracy, the system, and everybody, and then to have conversations. In the meanwhile, we can have many more of these sessions, Monica, if you are on board with it, to find these things so that in November this year, we are pre-booking a slot at the India Craft Week, wherein we can bring in multi-stakeholders into this conversation forward. Monica, over to you.
Yeah, the power sector, from the central government, who is going to listen and understand all these nuances.
Absolutely. We are already prepared for that. We have also the legal literacy campaigns, which we do exactly what you're saying, Somesh. So where the invitation is there, we have the campaigns in Hindi and Marathi. And yes, we've been prepared for this work. So it's great to see that, the need for it is being expressed on record today. And the Cultural Intellectual Property Rights Initiative has the ability to bring in the tools. So whenever we're invited, we're coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Most welcome. And this should really become a conversation. In fact, Ramesh, what I'll also do is I'll also speak to state governments to do individual state workshops. Because, this is something which is really required. I mean, with the Titan, we have been doing this on a large scale. We have already done another workshop with the government of Odisha. So what happens is, this is very important because these are things where we have to seed insight into people's mind. And then I think organizations to artisans to brands to retailers, everybody understands, their responsibilities and they participate very effectively. So it's very important.
Right. Well, very fabulously, CIPR has kind of started creating literature in local languages, in vernacular languages, so as to kind of empower the artisan to understand this more than any of us sitting and talking and making these conversations on and on. There is time now that they need to find representations in these platforms, so the conversations have to be from their end.
Absolutely.
They have to be integral to these conversations that we often have it at various platforms. But it's kind of something which we need to look forward that way we can have the artisans talking for themselves and not us or organizations wanting to represent them and take their voice forward. On this note, I would like to conclude this session. We are still can go on with a lot of more inputs coming in from all the sides, and it's a never-ending conversation. But we had a wonderful start to it, and also this is, I think, the concluding program of the month-long program of CIPR. Thank you very much for being part of it and for giving your wonderful insights, and we hope to take it forward. Thank you on behalf of CIPR and Save the Loom that we kind of had to bring all of you together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.